Hello everyone, let's continue on with the story of 1,000 Boy Kisses by Tillie Cole. When we arrived at the coast, the first thing I saw was the tall white lighthouse sitting on the edge of the cliff. The day was warm, the cold snap seemed to have passed, and the sky was bright. There was barely a cloud in the sky as the sun sat high, beaming its rays over the still water. Poppy parked the car and cut the engine. I agree. It's my second favorite place, she said. I nodded, watching the several families scattered around the soft sand. There were kids playing, seabirds circling, waiting for discarded food. Some adults were slumped against the dunes reading. Some were relaxing, eyes closed, lapping up the warmth. You remember coming here in the summer? Poppy asked, joy lacing her soft voice. Yeah, I rasped. She pointed underneath the pier. And there, kiss 75. She turned to me and laughed at the memory. We sneaked off from our families to stand under the pier, just so you could kiss me. She touched her lips, her eyes unfocused, lost in thought. You tasted of salt from the seawater, she said. Do you remember? Poppy opened the door. She looked back, excitement on her face, and asked, Are you ready? I got out of the car. The warm breeze blew my hair over my face. Taking a rubber band from my wrist, I pushed my hair back off my face into a loose bun and walked to the trunk to help Poppy with whatever she'd brought. When I glanced inside the large trunk, I saw she brought a picnic basket and another backpack. I had no idea what she had in that. I reached forward to take everything from her when she tried to carry it all herself. She released them for me to hold, then she stopped, motionless. Her stillness forced me to look up. I frowned, seeing her studying me. What? I asked. Room, she whispered, and touched my face with her fingertips. She skirted them over my cheeks and along my forehead. Finally, a huge smile broke out on her lips. I can see your face. Lifting onto her tiptoes, Poppy reached up and playfully tapped my hair. Trapped in the bun. I like this, she declared. Poppy's eyes tracked over my face one more time. Then she sighed. Rune Erik Christiansen, do you realize how utterly beautiful you are? I ducked my head. Hands ran down my chest. When I looked up, she added, Do you realize how deeply I feel about you? I slowly shook my head, needing her to tell me. She placed my hand over her heart and her hand over mine. I felt a steady beat under my palm, the steady beat that got faster as my eyes locked on hers. It's like music, she explained. When I look at you, when you touch me, when I see your face, when we kiss, my heart plays a song. It sings that it needs you like I need air. It sings to me that I adore you. It sings that I found its perfect missing part. Poppyman, I said soft, and she pressed a finger over my lips. Listen, Rune, she said, and she closed her eyes. I did too, and I heard it. I heard it as loudly as if it were next to my ear. The steady beats, the rhythm of us. When you're near, my heart doesn't sigh, it soars, she whispered, as if she didn't want to disturb the sound. I think hearts beat a rhythm like a song. I think that just like music, we're drawn to a particular melody. I heard your heart's song, and you heard mine. I opened my eyes, and Poppy stood, her dimples deep as she smiled and swayed to the beat. When her eyes opened, a sweet giggle slipped from her lips. I pushed forward and crushed our lips together. Poppy's hands went to my wrist, to my waist, holding tightly to my t-shirt as I moved my lips slowly against hers, backing us up until she rested against the car, my chest flush against her body. I felt the echo of her heartbeat in my chest. Poppy sighed as I slipped my tongue to slide against hers. Her hands tightened on my waist. When I drew back, she whispered, Kiss 432, at the beach with my room. My heart almost burst. I breathed heavily as I tried to gather myself. Poppy's cheeks were flushed, and she was breathing just as hard as me. We stayed that way, simply breathing, until Poppy pushed off the trunk and placed a kiss on my cheek. Turning, she lifted the backpack and put it over her shoulder. I went to take it from her, but she said, "I'm not too weak yet, baby. I can still carry some of the weight." Her words contained a double meaning. I knew she wasn't just talking about the bag, but about my heart. The darkness within me that she was incessantly trying to fight. Poppy moved away, allowing me to gather everything else. I followed her to a secluded spot on the far side of the beach, next to the pier. When we stopped, I spotted the post where I had kissed her all those years ago. A strange feeling spread in my heart, and I knew that before we left to return home, I was going to kiss her there again. Kiss her as a 17-year-old. Another kiss for her jar. "Is hair okay?" Poppy asked. "Yeah," I replied, placing the things on the sand. Seeing the umbrella and concerned that Poppy shouldn't get too much sun, I quickly planted it in the sand and opened it to give her some shade. As soon as the umbrella spread open and a blanket was on the sand, I nudged my chin to Poppy, indicating for her to move beneath it. She did, quickly kissing my hand as she passed, and my heart didn't sigh, it soared. My eyes were drawn to the quietly rolling ocean. Poppy sat down. Closing her eyes, she inhaled deeply. Watching Poppy embrace nature was like watching an answered prayer. The joy in her expression seemed limitless, the peace in her spirit humbling. I lowered myself to the sand. I sat forward, arms draping over my bent legs. I stared at the sea. I stared at the boats in the distance, wondering where they were going. "What adventure do you think they're on?" Poppy asked, reading my mind. "I don't know," I replied honestly. Poppy rolled her eyes and said, "I think they're leaving it all behind. I think they woke up one day and decided there's more to life. I think they decided, a couple in love, a boy and a girl, that they wanted to explore the world. They sold their possessions and bought a boat." She smiled and lowered her chin, cradling it in her hands, her elbows resting on her bent knees. "She loves to play music, and he loves to capture moments on film." I shook my head and glanced at her from the side of my eye. She didn't seem to care, instead adding, "And the world is good. They'll travel to far-off places, create music, art, and pictures. And along the way they'll kiss. They'll kiss, they'll love, and they'll be happy." She blinked as a gentle breeze whispered through our shade. When she looked at me again, she asked, "Doesn't that sound like the most perfect adventure?" I nodded. I couldn't speak. Poppy looked at my feet, and shaking her head, shuffled along the blanket until she was at the end of my legs. I raised an eyebrow in question. "You have boots on, Rune. It's a wonderfully sunny day, and you have boots on." Poppy then set to unzipping my boots. Pulling each one off, she rolled my jeans up to my ankles and nodded her head. "There," she said proudly. "That's a slight improvement." Unable not to find the humor in her sitting there so smugly, I reached forward and pulled her over me, lying down so she lay above me. "There," I repeated. "That's a slight improvement." Poppy giggled, awarding me a swift kiss. "And now?" "A huge improvement," I joked dryly. "A massive, asteroid-sized improvement." Poppy laughed harder. I rolled her over to lie beside me. Her arms stayed over my waist, and I ran my fingers down her soft, exposed skin. I stared silently at the sky. Poppy was quiet too, until she suddenly said, "It wasn't long after you left that I began feeling tired. So tired that I couldn't get out of bed." I grew still. She was finally telling me what happened, telling me it all. "My mama took me to the doctor, and they did some tests." She shook her head. "To be honest, everyone thought I was acting different because you had left." I closed my eyes and inhaled. "I did too," she added, holding me tighter. "For the first few days, I could let myself pretend you'd just gone on vacation. But after weeks began to pass, The void you left within me began to hurt so bad. My heart was completely broken. On top of that, my muscles ached. I was asleep too much, unable to find any energy. Poppy fell silent. Then she continued. We ended up having to go to Atlanta for more tests. We stayed with Aunt Didi while they figured out what was wrong. Poppy lifted her head and, with a hand on my cheek, guided my eyes to meet hers. I never told you, Rune. I kept up the pretense that I was okay, because I couldn't bear to hurt you more. I could see you weren't doing real good. Every time we video chatted, I could see you getting angrier and angrier at being back in Oslo. The things you said were just not you. So that visit to your Aunt Didi, I cut in. It was because you were sick? It wasn't just a visit like you told me? Poppy nodded, and I saw the guilt in her green eyes. I knew you, Rune, and I saw you were slipping. You were always sullen in attitude. You were always darker in nature, but when you were with me, you weren't. I could only imagine what finding out I was sick would do to you. Poppy's head gently fell back to rest on my chest. It wasn't long before I received my diagnosis, advanced Hodgkin lymphoma. It rocked my family. At first, it rocked me. How could it not? I held her closer, but Poppy inched back. Rune, I know I've never looked at the world like everyone else. I have always lived each day to the fullest. I know I've always embraced aspects of the world no one else does. I think, in some way, it was because I knew I wouldn't have the time to experience them like everyone else. I think deep down, my spirit knew. Because when the doctor told us I would only have a couple of years, even with medication and treatment, I was okay. Poppy's eyes began to shine with tears. Mine did too. We all stayed in Atlanta. We lived with Aunt Didi. Ida and Savannah started new schools. Daddy traveled for his work. I was homeschooled or tutored in hospital. My mama and daddy prayed for a miracle, but I knew there was none to be had. I was okay. I kept my chin up. The chemo was hard. Losing my hair was tough. Poppy blinked, clearing her vision, then confided, but cutting you off almost killed me. It was my choice. The blame lies with me. I just wanted to save you, Rune. Save you from seeing me that way. I saw what I was doing to my parents and sisters, but you I could protect. I could give you what my family didn't get, life, freedom, the chance to move on without pain. It didn't work, I managed to say. Poppy lowered her gaze. I know that now, but believe me, Rune, I thought of you every single day. I pictured you, prayed for you, hoped that the darkness I saw spreading within you had faded with my absence. Poppy rested her chin on my chest once more. Tell me, Rune, tell me what happened to you. My jaw clenched, not wanting to let myself feel what I did then, but I could never say no to my girl. It was impossible. I was angry, I said, pushing her hair from her pretty face. No one could tell me where you went, why you cut me off. My parents won't get off my back. My papa pissed me off 24/7. I blamed him for everything. I still do. Poppy opened her mouth to speak, but I shook my head. No, I bit out, don't. Poppy closed her mouth. I closed my eyes and forced myself to continue. I went to school, but it wasn't long before I fell in with people just as pissed at the world as me. It wasn't long before I began to party, to drink, to smoke, to do the opposite of anything my papa told me. Rune, Poppy said sadly. She didn't say anything else. That became my life. I threw my camera away. Then I packed away everything that reminded me of you. I barked out a laugh. Shame I couldn't pull out my heart and pack it away too, because that prick wouldn't let me forget you, no matter how much I tried. And then we returned, back here, and I saw you in the hallway, and all that anger I still carried in my veins turned into a tidal wave. I rolled onto my side, opened my eyes, and ran my hand down Poppy's face. Because you look so beautiful, any image I had in my head of what you would look like at 17 was blown out of the water. The minute I saw this brown hair, those green eyes fixed on mine, I knew that any effort I'd made over the past 2 years to push you away was ruined. By one look, ruined. I swallowed. Then when you told me about, I trailed off, and Poppy shook her head. No, she said. Enough now. You said enough. And you, I asked, why did you come back? Because I was done, she said with a sigh. Nothing was working. Each new treatment made no difference. The oncologist told us straight out nothing would work. That was all I needed to make up my mind. I wanted to go home. I wanted to live out my remaining days at home, on palliative treatment with those I loved most. Poppy shuffled closer, kissing my cheek, my head, and finally, my mouth. And now I have you. As I know now it was meant to be, this is where we were meant to be at this precise moment in time. Home. I felt a stray tear escape my eye. Poppy quickly brushed it away with her thumb. She leaned over me, across my chest, and said, I have come to understand that death for the sick is not so hard to endure. For us, eventually our pain ends. We go to a better place. But for those left behind, their pain only magnifies. Poppy took my hand and held it to her cheek. I really believe that tales of loss don't always have to be sad or sorrowful. I want mine to be remembered as a great adventure that I tried to live as best as I possibly could. Because how dare we waste a single breath? How dare we waste something so precious? Instead, we should strive for all those precious breaths to be taken in as many precious moments as we can squeeze into this short time on earth. That's the message I want to leave behind. And what a beautiful legacy to leave for those I love. If, as Poppy believed, a heartbeat was a song, then right now, in this moment, my heart would be singing with pride of the complete admiration I had for the girl I loved, at the way she saw life, at the way she tried to make me believe that there could be a life beyond her. I was sure that wasn't the case, but I could see that Poppy was determined, that determination never failed. So now you know, Poppy declared and rested her head on my chest. Now let's say no more about it. We have our future to explore. We won't be slaves to the past. I closed my eyes and she pleaded, Promise me, Rune. Finding my voice, I whispered, I promise. I fought back the emotions slicing me inside. I wouldn't show her any sign that I was sad. She would see only happiness from me today. Poppy's breathing evened out as I stroked her hair. The warm breeze flowed over us, taking with it the heaviness that had surrounded us. I let myself begin to drift off, thinking Poppy had too, when she murmured, What do you think heaven's like, Rune? I tensed, but Poppy's hands began to circle over my chest, ridding my body of the heaviness her question brought back. I don't know, I said. Poppy didn't offer anything, just stayed exactly where she was, shifting slightly to bring her tighter into my arms. I said, Somewhere beautiful, somewhere peaceful, somewhere where I see you again. I felt Poppy smile against my shirt. Me too, she agreed softly, and turned to kiss my chest. This time I was sure Poppy slept. I looked across the sand and watched as an old couple sat down near us. Their hands were clasped tightly. Before the woman could sit, the man spread a blanket on the sand. He kissed her cheek before helping her to sit down. A pang of jealousy shot through me, because we would never have felt that. We would never have that. Poppy and I would never grow old together, never have kids, never have a wedding, nothing. But as I glanced down at Poppy's thick brown hair and her delicate hands splayed on my chest, I let myself be grateful that at least I had her now. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I had her now. I had her since I was 5. I now realized why I had loved her so hard from being so young. So I had this time with her. Poppy believed her spirit always knew she'd die young. I was starting to think that maybe mine did too. Over an hour passed. Poppy was still sleeping. I gently lifted her from my chest and sat up. The sun had moved. Waves lapped ashore. Feeling thirsty, I opened a picnic basket and pulled out one of the bottles of water Poppy had packed. As I drank, my eyes rested on the backpack Poppy had carried from the trunk. Wondering what was inside, I hauled it over and gently opened the zipper. At first, all I saw was another black bag. This bag was padded. I pulled it out and my heart kicked into a sprint when I realized what I was holding. I sighed and closed my eyes. I lowered the bag to the blanket and rubbed my hand over my face. When I lifted my head, I opened my eyes and blankly stared out over the water. I watched the boats in the distance, Poppy's words filtering into my mind. I think they're leaving it all behind. I think they woke up one day and decided there's more to life. I think they decided, a couple in love, a boy and a girl, that they wanted to explore the world. They sold their possessions and bought a boat. She loves to play music, and he loves to capture moments on film. My eyes left the camera bag that I knew so well. I understood where she got her theory about the boats. He loves to capture moments on film. I tried to be angry with her. I gave up taking pictures 2 years ago. It wasn't who I was anymore. It was no longer my dream. NYU wasn't in my plans. I didn't want to pick the camera back up. But my fingers began to twitch, and despite being pissed at myself, I lifted the lid out of the case and peered inside. The old black and chrome vintage Canon that I had treasured stared up at me. I felt my face blanch, the blood moving to rush through to my heart, which slammed against my ribs. I had thrown this camera away. I had discarded it, and all that it meant. I had no idea how the hell Poppy had gotten hold of it. I wondered if she tracked it down and bought it. I lifted it from the bag and turned it over. There, scratched into the back, was my name. I had scraped it there on my 13th birthday, when my mama and papa gave me this camera. It was the exact one. Poppy had found my camera. Flipping the back, I saw a full roll of film inside. In the bag lay the lenses, the ones I knew so well. Despite the years, I still instinctively knew which one would work best for any given shot. Landscape, portrait, nighttime, daylight, natural setting, and studio. Hearing a soft rustle from behind me, I glanced over my shoulder. Poppy was sitting, watching me. Her eyes fell to the camera. Nervously inching forward, she said, "I asked your papa about it, where it had gone. He told me that you threw it away." Poppy's head tilted to the side. "You never knew, and he never told you, but he found it. He saw you had thrown it away. You had broken parts of it. The lenses were cracked and other things." I was clenching my jaw so tightly it ached. Poppy's finger traced the back of my hand that was resting in the blanket. "He had it repaired without you knowing. He's kept it safe for the past couple of years. He's kept up hope that you would find your way back to photography. He knew how much you loved it. He also blames himself for the fact that you gave it up." My instinct was to open my mouth and hiss out that was his fault. Everything was. But I didn't. For some reason, the twist in my stomach kept my mouth shut. Poppy's eyes glistened. "You should have seen him last night. When I asked him about it, he was so emotional, Ruin. Even your mama didn't know he'd kept it. He even had reels of film ready, just in case you ever wanted it back." I averted my gaze from Poppy's, instead refocusing on the camera. I didn't know how to feel about all that. I tried for angry, but to my surprise, anger refused to come. For some reason, I couldn't get the image from my head of my papa cleaning the camera and getting it fixed on his own. He even has a darkroom ready and waiting for you at your house. I closed my eyes when Poppy added the last part. I was silent, completely silent in response. My head was racing with too many thoughts, too many images, and I was conflicted. I had vowed never to take another picture, but vowing it had been one thing. Holding the object of my addiction in my hands compromised everything I had sworn to fight against, to rebel against, to throw away, just like my papa had cast aside my feelings when he chose to return to Oslo. The pit of heat in my stomach began to spread. This was the anger I anticipated. This was the blast of fire I was expecting. I inhaled deeply, bracing for the darkness to overwhelm me when, suddenly, Poppy jumped to her feet. "I'm going to the water," she announced, and walked past me without another word. I watched her walk off. I watched her sink her feet into the soft sand. The breeze flicking up her short hair. I stayed mesmerized as she skipped to the water's edge, allowing the breaking waves to lap over her feet. She held her dress higher on her legs to avoid the splashes. Her head tipped back to feel the sun on her face. Then she glanced back to where I sat. She glanced back and she laughed, free, without abandon, like she had no cares in the world. I was transfixed, even more so when a reflected ray of sun from the sea cast a golden sheen on the side of her face, her green eyes emerald in this new light. I lost my breath, actually fought for breath at how stunning she looked. Before I had even thought it through, I had my camera in my hand. I felt the weight transfer into my hands, and closing my eyes, I let the urge succeed. I lifted the camera to my eye. Uncapping the lens, I found the most perfect angle of my girl dancing in the waves, and I clicked. I clicked the button on the camera, my heart shuddering at every snap of the shutter, sure in the knowledge that I was capturing Poppy in this moment, happy. Adrenaline surged through me at the thought of how these pictures would develop. It was why I used the vintage camera, the anticipation of the darkroom, the delayed gratification of seeing the wonder that you had caught, the skill it took to work the camera to achieve that perfect shot, a split second of serenity, a moment of magic. Poppy, in her own world, ran along the shore, her cheeks flushing pink with the warmth of the sun. Lifting her hands into the air, Poppy let the hem of her dress fall and dampen with splashes from the water. Then she turned to face me. As she did, she grew perfectly still, as did my heart in my chest. My finger waited, poised over the button, waiting for the right shot, and then it came. It came as a look of pure bliss spread across her face. It came as her eyes closed and her head tilted back, as if it were a relief, as if uncensored happiness possessed her. I lowered the camera. Poppy held out her hand, feeling high from the rush of having my passion sprung upon me. I jumped to my feet and walked across the sand. When I took Poppy's hand, she pulled me close and pressed her lips on mine. I let her take the lead. I let her show me how much this meant to her. This moment, and I let myself feel it too. I allowed myself, for this brief moment, to push aside the heaviness I always carried like a shield. I allowed myself to get lost in the kiss, lifting the camera up high, even with my eyes closed in no direction. I was convinced I had captured the best picture of the day. Poppy stepped back and silently guided me back to the blanket, sitting us down, resting her head on my shoulder. I lifted my arm over her warm, sun-kissed shoulders and pulled her in close to my side. Poppy glanced up as I lazily placed a kiss on her head. When I met her eyes, I sighed and pressed my forehead to hers. "You're welcome," she whispered, as she looked away to stare out over the sea. I hadn't felt like this in so long. I hadn't felt this peace inside since before we parted, and I was thankful to Poppy, more than thankful. We're going to leave it out there for this video, but I hope to see you again in the next video.